Sometimes he looked innocent, and sometimes he had a smoldering bad boy look on his face. And girl, he made puberty come faster. According to Wikipedia, he starred in movies such as Little Giants and Casper. Casper sounds familiar, but when I looked at still shots of the movie, I don't really remember him. Andrew Keegan. I always remembered him as the love interest of Stephanie Tanner from Full House, as well as his role in the movie 10 Things I Hate About You. I'll never forget that picture of him inside one of those teeny pop magazines, wearing a white wife beater with black suspender straps, long wavy bangs, and the biggest engaging smile. One leg propped up and young Reena's heart pumping. These magazines were all the rage for us girls in middle school. We would talk about who we thought were the hunkiest guys we had crushes on. I even remember the day our male teacher snatched our magazines and slammed them on the table. This is smut. We grabbed our precious magazines and clutched them tightly to our chest. It was the funniest thing until we realized he was being serious. No more magazines for us girls. What a killjoy. But my true celebrity crushes were Eddie Ciprian and Casper Van Dien. Eddie and those dimples made a permanent mark in my teenage heart. In one of those magazines, there was a little excerpt that contained questions asking about what he liked. He responded with, "I love taking long walks at the beach during sunset. I love down-to-earth people. I love animals, especially dogs." And I fell in love. He was so dreamy to me that I cut out his picture and the excerpt and glued it onto an index card. I cut it down to the size of a baseball card just so it could look discreet. On the back of the card, I expressed how perfect we would be together, how I had fallen in love with him, and that one day we would have long walks on the beach together. Love, Reena. I kept this card in my book bag and carried it with me to school on a daily basis all throughout 6th grade. He was my soulmate, you know. One day, I decided to take that card out of my book bag and to place it into my desk at school. I normally would leave it inside my bag, but I wanted to look at him from time to time that day. Probably because I was sad, and his face brought me comfort. Around 3 o'clock, our class would always have an hour of quiet time, choosing a book to read individually before school was done for the day. I chose a random book from the bookcase and skipped back to my seat. I pretended to read, holding the card in one hand and using the book as a shield with my other hand. I was daydreaming about Eddie and how our life would be like together, completely losing track of time. The bell rang and it was time to go. I rushed to put the book back and gathered all the things I needed to take home. When I was packing my book bag, I searched for my lover boy, but I couldn't find him. I started to panic and ransack the contents inside to bring him to school again. From then on, I kept him safe within my Hello Kitty journal that I kept underneath my mattress. I had a crush on Eddie even up until the soap opera days, Sunset Beach. I even remembered relating the show's name back to that excerpt about him enjoying sunsets at the beach. He still looks so handsome, and yeah, the crush was real. By the way, Sunset Beach was so dramatic. The storyline was basic. Everyone was a cheater, and all they did was secretly hook up with each other, get caught, or blackmail each other. Even the ones that were steadfast in love would eventually succumb to the devil woman or man. I have to mention Days of Our Lives as well. That was another soap opera favorite. I just remember the storyline getting more and more crazy. A character can only go through so many changes before morphing into a completely different character from who they originally were. And in my opinion, character development is important. You get to see how they evolve, perhaps from a protagonist to an antagonist, or vice versa. But when the character starts bouncing back and forth each season, you start to think they're all going crazy, having midlife crises each week. Clearly, the writers have exhausted all the dramatic scenarios in which to put the characters through. This actually cheapened the storyline, and both Sunset Beach and Days of Our Lives no longer held that same appeal as it once did. Let's move on to the next heartthrob, Casper Van Dien in Starship Troopers. I love science fiction, especially when they add in humor and over-the-top creatures. In this movie, they had insectoid species called arachnids that were trying to take over the Earth. Hot guy and Earth invasion, perfecto. Here's another throwback, Tremors. Y'all remember Tremors with the gigantic sandworms that were trying to eat people, right? That gave me the creeps as a kid, but I loved each movie series because it spoke to my irrational fear of monsters existing in real life. They even recently brought the series back, A Cold Day in Hell in 2018 and Shrieker Island 2020. Honestly, I feel like cult classics should be left alone. Stop trying to continue the storyline when it's already been put to rest. Anyways, teenage crushes come and go as often as you flip the channel on TV, and I watched a lot of TV growing up. Lots of movies. But being a teenage girl was especially awkward for me because my childhood best friend, Claudia, was the most popular, beautiful, outgoing girl in school. And then there was me. I was shy and awkward, but it worked for us, and she brought a lot of joy into my life. One of our favorite stores to roam around in was Claire's Accessories. They always had the cutest things: mini glitter nail polishes, feather pens, cute keychains, Lisa Frank notebooks, skinny silver hoop earrings, and those quintessential plastic elastic chokers. All the things that a 90's teen would ever want and need. One Saturday, we went to Claire's to browse the makeup section, and Claudia picked up this beauty powder called Fairy Dust, which was supposed to give you this radiant glow. She shook the tester onto the back She rubbed the powder onto her face, and wow, she looked so pretty and radiant, like an angel. I watched her admire her own reflection in the mirror, knowing she looked amazing. Of course, she bought it and wore it every day to school. Everyone noticed how glowy her skin was, and I wanted some of the same reaction, but from my crush in our class. I decided to buy my own fairy dust and was super excited to use it the next day. I applied it liberally with the scratchiest brush I owned, not really noticing that glow that I had wanted on my face. I piled on at least 3 layers, feeling confident and pretty as I walked out that door. On my way to school, I remember being noticed by a lot of people that day, and I felt so good about myself. The moment we all sat in our seats, I turned back to say something to Claudia, hoping my crush who was sitting next to her would notice me. My crush noticed me, alright? He furrowed his brows and asked, "What's on your face?" "What do you mean?" "You look like a disco ball." All of that self-esteem I had that morning sank down into the pits of my stomach. I could feel my face burning red. I was mortified, and I only managed to say, "Whatever," and turned back around. During recess, Claudia came up to me and started wiping my face with her hand. "What are you doing?" I asked. "You put too much on. Here, look." And she handed me her compact mirror. OMG. Just Google silver glitter face, and I looked exactly like that girl in the first picture, like a disco cyborg. Every speck of silver glitter was extremely noticeable on my face. I couldn't believe I had been walking around like this, looking stupid. The worst part was that it wouldn't even rub off because of how much I had put on. It just transferred everywhere onto my hands and clothes. It got to the point where I was like, F it, and gave up. Guess I'm just meant to be a potato forever. But the fun didn't stop there. In 7th grade, Claudia invited me to hang out with her friend to help them choose Halloween costumes at a store called Ricky's. Of course, her friend was just as pretty and outgoing as her, and here I am, a potato. I've never been to Ricky's before. It was my first time seeing employees looking the way they did, wearing neon makeup with super edgy clothing and hairstyles. There were tons of wigs in the store, neon wigs, wigs of all sorts, costume makeup and jewelry, feather boas, cutout shirts and cutout leggings. I actually felt intimidated being in there. I followed them to the costume section, where they specifically looked for sexy outfits. They tried on all sorts of Halloween costumes, having fun dressing up as all teenagers do. Everything looked amazing on them, and I just looked like a 9-year-old child dressing up. I remember feeling let down by my own genetics that day, and I just wanted this outing to be over. But things went to a whole nother level the next moment. Claudia's friend knew one of the employees there, and she allowed us to enter the adult section of the store. You had to be 18 or 21 to enter, but she let us